Let me ask you something that might surprise you. You've probably heard about eating fresh vegetables, taking your medications on time, getting enough sleep, all the things doctors like me remind you about constantly. But I want to talk to you today about something that happens in almost every home, every single day, and almost nobody is talking about it in connection to one of the most dangerous cancers in older adults. I'm talking about reheating food. Now, before you turn this off thinking, my leftovers are going to kill me, please stay with me. Because this isn't about fear. This is about information that I genuinely wish more of my senior patients knew before certain habits became decades-long routines. And when we're talking about pancreatic cancer, a cancer that is notoriously silent, often diagnosed very late, and disproportionately affects people over the age of 65, knowing this information could genuinely matter. So today I'm going to walk you through 5 specific foods that, when reheated repeatedly or incorrectly, may significantly increase your risk of pancreatic cancer. I'll explain exactly why, not in complicated medical jargon, but in plain, honest language that I use with my own patients. And at the end, I'll give you practical, simple swaps that don't require you to change everything about how you eat. Let's start with the first food, and I think this one is going to catch you off guard. Number 1, reheated processed or smoked meats. Think about your typical breakfast. Maybe some leftover sausage from yesterday, a few slices of bacon that you've warmed up in the microwave, or deli meats you've briefly heated on the stove for a sandwich. These foods are already classified by the World Health Organization as Group 1 carcinogens, meaning there is strong scientific evidence that they increase cancer risk even when eaten fresh. But here is where it gets more serious for our conversation today. When processed meats are reheated, especially at high temperatures, the nitrites and nitrates they contain undergo a chemical transformation. They form compounds called nitrosamines, and nitrosamines are among the most consistently studied cancer-promoting substances in relation to pancreatic cancer specifically. Research published in peer-reviewed journals has found that high consumption of processed meats and their reheated byproducts is associated with a notably elevated risk of pancreatic cancer, particularly in older adults whose digestive systems are less efficient at neutralizing these compounds. Your pancreas, which is responsible for producing insulin and digestive enzymes, is exposed to everything that passes through your gastrointestinal system. When it is repeatedly exposed to nitrosamines over years and decades, the cellular stress accumulates. And for seniors whose cellular repair mechanisms are already slowing down with age, that accumulation matters more than it does in a 35-year-old body. My practical advice: limit processed meats in general. But if you do have them, eat them once, fresh, and don't reheat them. When you want a warm breakfast protein, a fresh egg or a small amount of canned fish heated gently is a much safer choice. Now let's talk about number 2, and this one is in almost every senior's kitchen: reheated rice. I know this sounds unusual. Rice seems so harmless, and it is, when handled properly. But rice has a very specific safety problem that most people don't know about. Uncooked rice frequently contains spores of a bacteria called Bacillus cereus. When you cook rice, you kill the active bacteria, but not the spores. Those spores survive. And if cooked rice is left at room temperature, even for just a couple of hours, those spores rapidly multiply into active bacteria that produce toxins. Now here's the connection that concerns me as a doctor who sees older patients. Those toxins, particularly when repeatedly produced through cycles of cooking, cooling, and reheating, trigger chronic low-grade inflammation in the gastrointestinal tract. Chronic inflammation, as we now understand very well in oncology research, is one of the primary environmental drivers of pancreatic cancer development over time. The pancreas is a particularly inflammation-sensitive organ. Conditions like chronic pancreatitis, which is essentially long-term inflammation of the pancreas, are well established as significant risk factors for pancreatic cancer. Beyond the bacterial concern, rice that is reheated multiple times also goes through starch retrogradation changes that alter how your body processes it, potentially leading to blood sugar spikes that place additional metabolic stress on the pancreas, which must then work harder to produce insulin. For diabetic seniors or those with prediabetes who are already at higher risk for pancreatic cancer, this is particularly relevant. My advice: cook rice fresh when you can. If you must store it, refrigerate it within 1 hour of cooking and consume it within 24 hours. Reheat it only once to a steaming hot temperature throughout, not just warm on the outside. Number 3 is one that might genuinely shock you: reheated potatoes. Potatoes are a comfort food for so many seniors, and there's nothing wrong with loving them. But like rice, potatoes cooked and then left to cool, and especially those reheated multiple times, develop something called acrylamide when exposed to high heat again. Acrylamide is a chemical compound that forms naturally when starchy foods are cooked at high temperatures. It was classified as a probable human carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. The concerning part is the level of acrylamide that can develop when potatoes are cooked, stored, and then reheated at high heat, particularly in the microwave or in a frying pan. Studies in both animal models and large human populations have found associations between high acrylamide intake and increased risk of several cancers, with pancreatic cancer appearing in a meaningful portion of that research. For seniors who eat leftover roasted or fried potatoes regularly, warming them back up in the oven or microwave, this is a pattern worth reconsidering. Additionally, reheated potatoes that have been improperly stored can also develop the same Bacillus cereus toxin problem I mentioned with rice, further compounding the inflammatory insult to the gut and pancreas. My practical recommendation: eat your potatoes fresh when they're prepared. If you have leftovers, eat them cold or at room temperature the next day rather than reheating at high heat. A cold boiled potato with a little olive oil and herbs is actually quite pleasant and retains its nutritional value beautifully, and it eliminates the acrylamide risk. Number 4, and this one involves a food most people consider healthy: reheated spinach and other leafy greens. Here is something that surprises almost everyone. Spinach, beets, celery, and certain other vegetables are high in natural nitrates. Not the synthetic kind added to processed meats, but natural dietary nitrates. Under normal circumstances, these are not a concern. In fact, dietary nitrates from vegetables in their fresh state are generally considered beneficial for blood pressure and cardiovascular health. However, when these vegetables are cooked and then reheated, especially in a microwave or at high heat, a chemical conversion occurs. Those natural nitrates are converted to nitrites, and when combined with the proteins and amino acids present in your digestive system during metabolism, they can again form those nitrosamines I mentioned in connection with processed meats. The difference in risk between fresh spinach and repeatedly reheated spinach is not negligible. Studies from European research institutions have specifically flagged the practice of reheating nitrate-rich vegetables as a concern for cancer risk when done habitually. For seniors who eat a lot of cooked greens, which is common and generally wonderful for health, the key word is not stop eating spinach. The key word is reheat carefully. If you cook a large batch of spinach, eat it fresh and hot, and if you have leftovers, consume them cold in a salad the next day, rather than putting them back on the stove or in the microwave. Now we come to number 5, and this may be the most commonly reheated food of all: leftover chicken and other poultry. Chicken that is reheated is a very common source of what I want to call cumulative carcinogenic exposure in the context of our discussion today. Here's why. Poultry, particularly the skin and fatty portions, when reheated at high temperatures, undergoes a process called lipid oxidation. Oxidized fats produce a category of compounds called aldehydes, including one called malondialdehyde, which has been studied extensively for its role in promoting oxidative stress and DNA damage at the cellular level. The pancreatic cells, like all cells, contain DNA that must remain stable to function properly and reproduce without error. Repeated exposure to oxidized fat compounds from reheated poultry introduces a consistent source of oxidative stress to the body, including to the pancreas. Over years and decades, and remember, we're talking about habits that many seniors have had for most of their adult lives, this kind of repeated low-level exposure can contribute meaningfully to the cellular environment in which cancer can begin to develop. Beyond the lipid oxidation issue, reheated chicken that has been stored improperly is also one of the leading sources of food poisoning from bacteria like Salmonella and Campylobacter. Chronic or repeated gut infections drive inflammation, and again, we come back to inflammation as a central mechanism in pancreatic cancer risk. My recommendation for chicken: eat it fresh when you can. If you're reheating it, use an oven at moderate temperature rather than a microwave. Ensure it reaches a fully hot internal temperature throughout, and never reheat it more than once. And trim the skin and fatty portions before reheating, as these are where lipid oxidation is most concentrated. Now I want to take a moment and speak to you not just as a source of information, but as your doctor, even if I'm speaking to you through this screen. I know that for many seniors, reheating food is not a casual habit. It is a necessity. It saves money. It reduces waste. It makes life simpler when cooking a full fresh meal every day is not always possible, whether because of mobility, fatigue, living alone, or simply the natural slowing down that comes with age. I am not here to make you feel guilty about any of this. I am here to help you make the best choices with the real circumstances of your life. The changes I'm suggesting are not dramatic. They are not expensive. Most of them involve small adjustments in how you store food, how often you reheat it, and what temperature you use. Things like refrigerating food quickly after cooking, reheating only once, choosing gentler heating methods when possible, eating some leftovers cold instead of reheated, and being thoughtful about which foods are worth the habit of reheating regularly. Pancreatic cancer is called a silent killer for a reason. It rarely causes noticeable symptoms until it has already advanced significantly. Early detection remains difficult. That makes prevention, true, practical, daily prevention, especially important. And the truth is that what you eat and how you prepare your food is one of the most powerful tools you have available to you right now, today, without a prescription, without a procedure, and without waiting for an appointment. If you are over 65, or if you have a family history of pancreatic cancer, or if you have diabetes or have ever had pancreatitis, I would encourage you to have a conversation with your own doctor about your specific risk profile. Bring up these foods. Ask whether your habits could be modified. Doctors appreciate engaged patients who take their health seriously, and showing up to an appointment having thought about your diet and lifestyle is one of the most productive things you can do. Before I close, let me give you one more thing to carry with you. A simple way to remember today's 5 foods: processed meats, rice, potatoes, leafy greens when reheated repeatedly, and poultry. Not 5 foods to eliminate forever. 5 foods to handle more carefully, more intentionally, and with a little more awareness of what happens to them when they go back into the heat a second or third time. Your body has been working hard for you for decades, especially your pancreas, quietly, invisibly, doing its job every single day without a single complaint until sometimes, unfortunately, it can't anymore. Treat it with the same care